I've come to that realization a while back that I've really created art history. Me and my team, not just me. It's me and my team. We've created art history. The same way Andy Warhol with his soup can changed the fine art world. The same way that Drew Struzan with his movie poster stuff that he did changed the movie industry. We changed the record industry, but more than that, I've created art history.
I did want to wish you happy birthday first and make sure that check on Queen Bee. Just for people listening, that's Bonnie, your wife. And, how many years have you guys been married?
61.
That's amazing.
My harshest critic and my best friend. You got to have a friendship along with the love.
Listen, Queen Bee's been in my biscuits too, so don't feel like you've got the exclusivity on that. But if you don't mind, Ernie, your art is everywhere. You've impacted tens of thousands of lives. But one of the things you told me once was the story about how you met and the impact Queen Bee had on your career. Would you mind just recapping that? I would love to get that story out.
I'll give you the short story because the long story would take 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
And we would need to get her in here. So I'll just give you my side of it. Well, it's really funny because she was dating my best friend. I grew up in San Jose, Northern California. It was a big car. Cars were everything, especially when you're in high school and hot rods. And so my best friend and I went on a double date, and he was dating Bonnie. I had never met her, and I had a girlfriend. And we go to the drive-in, and I can't, from the moment she came out with her dad, because her dad wanted to see who was in the car, because my friend went up to the door to get her, but he followed her back out. And so we were at the drive-in, and during the intermission, my best friend and my date went to the concession stand, and I turned around and I looked at Bonnie and I said, you're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen, and I'm in love with you, and I think I want to marry you. I was 17, and she looked at me and she said, you're the biggest creep I ever met in my whole life, hitting on your best friend's girlfriend. So and as she's telling me that, they're coming back from the concession stand, and I'm just praying to God that she doesn't say anything, and she didn't. And they ended up breaking up a couple of weeks later. We ended up hooking up while we were dragging the main, like in American Graffiti. And we've been together ever since. When we went to New York, the better part of that is when I went to New York, I thought that I was going to be able to bring New York to its knees, okay? Because I had gone from a freshman that knew nothing to a senior that was really top of the class and honors and all that stuff. So my ego was big, and I had been freelancing a couple different agencies in San Francisco. So I packed up a portfolio and went to New York and told Bonnie before I left, give me 2 weeks, and I'll be sending for you, and you'll come and we'll be together. So after 2 weeks, actually a little less than 2 weeks, I had, used all my connections that I had made before I went to New York with calling agencies and making appointments. And I had one left, and I was so depressed because I was never used to that much rejection I had never been to New York. I'd never really been out of California. So to me, it was like an alien planet with a lot of energy. And so I called Bonnie on a Thursday night, and I said, I realized that I way overestimated who I am and what I could do, the value I could bring, and I'm going to come home. And it's going to be great because there's agencies that I can work for in San Francisco and in Oakland. And, we'll be next to our parents, both in Northern California and San Jose. And, I just overestimated it. I'm going to book a ticket. I'm coming back. And she said, if you come back, I'm not going to be here when you come back. And I thought, well, what, you mean you can't pick me up at the airport? I mean, what is the deal? And she said, no, I don't want to spend my life with a person that's going to run from any rejection the first time it happens. And I don't want to live like that. So I won't be here for you when you come back. And I swear to God, if she would have never said that, I would have gone on a plane and gone back to Northern California, and who knows what my career would have been. saying that, I had one opportunity left on a Monday morning. This was on a Thursday. So I spent the weekend just, trying to build up my confidence after all that rejection, and really, saying, okay, I got to have this job, and I got it. And that was that Dolls Alive thing I did for International Paper Company that won all these awards. And that became Jesus Christ Superstar at another agency. And then the Rolling Stones stung at another agency after that. And, without her, I would be living in a cardboard box.
Yeah, maybe we should be interviewing her.
Yeah, you should be. I'll tell you what, she was still to this day, Larry, you know that, it firsthand. To this day, she handles all the finance and stuff. I mean, I don't do any of that,
But, Ernie, everybody knows your art. Everybody knows how creative you are and your legacy. My God, it's all over my house. It's all over our office. It's all over my T-shirt. Everybody knows
Yeah,
that
I see
story,
that.
right? We're both getting on in age, and as you get older, you start thinking about what impact am I going to have, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me about what your life you think is going to mean when you're gone. Your impact, right? What value? I mean, share with me. Your accomplishments are in the thousands, but what does Ernie think about his impact? If you were talking to an up and coming artist or some of the guys in the bands that what would you tell them?
Well, the first thing I say is get some good legal understanding, because as a creative person, you always find yourself in that situation where people, want what you have and will take it sometimes, especially these days. So you got to be able to protect yourself and understand how that works. Secondly, my job one was always, whether it was in corporate America or in music, it was to create the emotional connection between the product or the musician or the group, the music and the fans. So I think that I've been able to accomplish that. I mean, myself, along with a handful of others, have created images that'll last forever. Long after I'm gone into dust, these images are iconic. And there's, to date, I've done 251 album covers and probably 5 or 10 times that many corporate projects. But each one of them can stand alone, can stand in its uniqueness and the value that it brought to the brand or the group. And, starting with that Stones tongue that's on your chest, and even before that, the Jesus Christ Superstar, even though I was working in corporate America in an ad agency, what are the odds of the agency that I went to work for would have Decca Records as an account? I mean, I was always into music in college and stuff growing up, going to college in Northern California, San Francisco, where all the action was in the 60s and the hippie movement and all that. I mean, what are the odds of me getting an opportunity at an agency that had Decca Records? And by this time, the insecurity was leaving. The value I was bringing was really speaking for itself, with starting with the Dolls Alive national sales meeting for International Paper Company, over 500 salespeople. And, I nailed it, and it won all these awards and hung in Union Carbide building in New York, and all that acceptance now, instead of the rejection. Being a creative person, whatever field you're in, whether it's in business or in medicine or in art or, being a builder, the creativity is really always the value that you bring, the uniqueness and the reality of it, being able to do it, come up with an idea. I mean, I remember in the record business, there were a lot of designers and stuff that would have these ideas, but they were impractical to do. I mean, it just was, so being able to connect that piece of it with what I was doing graphically really added the value that kept us going. I mean, I'm still doing business with clients that I did work with 51 years ago. So being able to establish that kind of value that you bring, they know when they need, and I don't mind sitting on the bench. I've got clients that have come and gone and come and gone and gone and come back. And, I don't mind sitting on the bench. I'm a utility player. I can play several positions, and you put me in when you need to put score on the board. When you you need to put wins in your category, measurable success. That's when you bring me in, and I'm fine. I've always been fine with doing that. At Pacific Pioneer, we made our mark in music, but we never stopped having one foot in corporate because it was important. I didn't want to become a person that was oh, you're the guy that did album covers. Well, yeah, I did album covers, but I did 10 times as many corporate pieces that you would, for companies like Nestle and Kraft, the two largest food companies in the world I worked with for 30 years. Coca-Cola, it goes on. And then Rockwell International, NBC, Disney, all these different companies, InBev, the world's largest beer company. Worked with them for 3 years on Bass, Beck's, Stella Artois, all these different brands. And that was really because of the music awareness, but taking more than the music, because the music wasn't really getting us corporate work. At that time, our music wasn't selling product. So corporate America was kind of afraid of us, and we were different. We had positioned, because of the music, we positioned ourselves as a youth marketing agency. If you wanted to hit the youth market, whether you were in music or in construction or whatever, you would come to us because we held the key to that segment. And it was really great. I mean, and we never realized all this till later on, but, it all came into play with, just getting together and doing it. I was very lucky. I was lucky enough to surround myself with people that were much, much more creative than I was, but they didn't do what I did. Okay, there's nobody there competing against each other to handle an account. Everybody has their specialty, and you as the creative director, you as the head of it all, assign the right people to the right project. So that was another piece of the key of becoming successful and adding value and being able to have a career. My work is still known today. I mean, how incredible is it to be able to say that you did something 3 years ago, and it's still relevant today. And every year, every generation rediscovers it. That's a beautiful thing about music versus corporate. If it was all just corporate, well, yeah, we did a campaign for Coca-Cola, 25 years ago, and nobody remembers it, but it was good at the time. The beautiful thing about having that one foot in music is that it keeps getting rediscovered. Every generation discovers it. And as long as people have ears and eyes, I'll be relevant.
That's got to make you feel great, right? To know that
I've made a mark.
Yeah, that everything comes back to granddad, right? So you're like the grand old man. If your messages wasn't truthful and ethical and had an impact, they would be long forgotten. Ernie, I'd like to ask you too about, you have seen now, 6 generations. You've been in business at the highest levels. How is it changing? What would you tell an up-and-coming Ernie? What would you have told your Ernie New York self, right?
I'd say learn the computer, learn all the programs, man, because AI is really the future. I was at lunch a month or so ago with a very famous photographer, Glenn Wexler. And he's a very, very well-known photographer. He lives here in the desert. His father was an architect that designed a lot of the Rat Pack homes here in the desert. Very successful. Anyway, we were talking about AI, and I don't know that much about it, but we were talking about illustrators and Drew and Bill and the guys that worked at Pacific Pioneer and all the great illustrations that we created. So he takes out his phone, he does a thing, and he goes, I want a picture of a 60s kind of lady with a Mucha kind of Art Nouveau feel to it in a very, hot, exciting background. And within a minute or so, the phone sends him a picture that was like this most amazing illustration I've ever seen in my life. And it's just like that. And then he said, no, change the color scheme in the background of this, make her a little younger, do a couple things. Less than a minute, it comes back and it's done. And it's his. He created it. He has the rights to it. Okay. And it's in high resolution so he can reproduce it. So illustrators learn AI. It's like using 3% of your brain instead of 100% of your brain. So I clunk along, but it's okay because I still do everything old school. I still do sketches, but that's going to be gone now. I think that the small business guy, the artisan is coming back. There'll always be a place for it because at a certain point, that's why there's Ferraris and Testarossa, $1 million cars, and most people buy a Honda. They'll buy a lesser car, a Kia. But there's an audience out there for the Lamborghini and the McCullens and the Rolls Royces, and those are the people that you really appeal to. Those are the people that I appeal to, because if you don't have it yet, you'll get it.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah. I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine, and when the Apple Watch came out, he said the market for mechanical watches is over.
Yeah.
And it has done nothing but grow. And the prices of a handmade fine watch just keep going through the roof, right?
Sure.
And I don't recall Ferrari's prices coming down at all.
No.
Right?
No.
So
McCullen, none of them.
McLaren, they cannot, as the reason I think that AI will be a tool, but it won't be as much as people think that it might, is because humans are tactile, and we are still in desperate need of that human touch, because right, and all AI will do, right, it's like the Apple Watch. It will do everything. It'll tell you your blood pressure. It'll tell you that you're hungry. It'll tell you to go to sleep. But it's a gadget.
It'll tell you where to go buy stuff.
But it's a gadget, right? It's a mass-produced gadget. Now it's really cool technology, but it costs, I don't know, $250. But people are paying $250,000 for something that's handmade that all it does is tell the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true. That's really a great analogy. You're right.
Yeah.
It's that whatever lacks that emotional connection. Again, that's another thing that I always try to do, is create that link, create that bridge, because that was my job, to create that emotional connection, that bridge between the artist and his music and the fan. The client, the product, and the consumer. And it's all the same.
That's where you excelled, because you taught me, you said, Larry, my job is to create the bridge between the band and the artist and the fan, right? So first, AI will never understand that. So it can create images, but it cannot turn an emotion into an image. And that's what you did, right? That's where
and
you
it
excel.
Also can't create, it can't create an idea. It is only as good as what you tell it to do. So it needs to have input from you every step of the way. And eventually over time, like a child learning or an adult learning, AI is doing the same thing. And I guess the big fear is that it's going to learn too much and turn against us. And now we're back into Star Wars and, Space Odyssey and all that. But yeah, I agree. It's never going to be able to achieve that.
But when it comes to what you do, you can still tell that those AI images are fake.
But it doesn't have what I have, which is the idea. For me, it's all about the concept.
Yeah.
Without the concept, Drew Struzan, the most collected illustrator in the world, wouldn't know where to start. They need that spark, and I have the spark. I have that magical spark that's burning just as bright today as it was, 51 years ago or 52 years ago. So that's where I still am able. But I'm a dinosaur. I'm for some people, I'm probably way too old. It's like Bernie Sanders talking at Coachella. It was related to him on that. Who's this old fart up there telling us about this old billionaire telling us how to people that have paid $10,000 for front row seats and stuff. So I sometimes feel like that. But the idea, as long as I can create the idea that's relevant, has value, and works measurably, then I'm still going to be around. And at 80, and you know what? It's really funny, Larry, because the insecurity of being a creative person, I always had this fear of like, what if somebody comes to me for a solution and I don't have it? I can't come up with it. So what I did was, starting, 20, 30 years ago, I started taking all the ideas, the sketches that were never bought, the things that were never sold, and I kept putting them in boxes. So that if that day ever came where I couldn't come up with an idea, I could go to these boxes and start going through stuff and seeing old ideas that I can make new again. So, but I've never had to go back to those boxes. I got 3 or 4 legal size boxes.
Yeah. Now, you've mentioned Drew a couple of times, and thanks to you, I've invested in a couple of original Drew pieces. But weren't you really Drew's mentor at one time? He worked for you, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We worked together for about 5 years, and he was a staff illustrator at Pacific Pioneer. And really, he came out of Art Center with the highest honors of anybody ever to graduate from there, and he couldn't get a job because he was a Jehovah's Witness. Nobody would hire him. So I had I stopped seeing portfolios, and I had made an appointment with him a month or so earlier to come and show me his book. And so I'm at the office one Saturday afternoon, working on some Jefferson Airplane sketches, and he came to show his portfolio, and I was absolutely blown away. But he was a painter. He wasn't really an illustrator, and there's a big difference. Illustrators are whores. They'll sacrifice their art for money. Fine artists will die penniless to not have to compromise what they're creating. So I had to make that transition for Drew from a fine artist to an illustrator. And he did it really, really well. And in the collection, I have, I think, 73 of his originals. You can put the first one, he gave me a couple that when he was in college. They were in the shows. And then you could put every other piece till the time he left us with Welcome to My Nightmare. And you could see, it's like one of those flip books. You can see the evolution of his style, going from a fine artist to an illustrator that got the movie poster business by the horns and just changed it completely. He is the most collected illustrator in the world.
Yeah.
And now he's got Alzheimer's.
Oh
and
man.
he can't
talk,
create.
Yeah.
He's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
No, it's bad.
Yeah.
But he's in the last stages.
You told me the story about how you helped him change his signature. Remember that?
Yeah, I designed his logo for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he had this funky way of signing his name, and at one point I said, you really need to have something, a little different, a little more unique, a little flair to it. So I designed this logo. It took me about 10 minutes, and he started using it. He loved it. He still used it up until, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago when he started signing stuff differently. But yeah, I designed his logo for him. We worked really well together. He was just, he could do more in an 8-hour day than most people could do in 3 or 4 days. I compare him to like Elon Musk. Musk is a genius. He is amazing in what he is able to do. And yeah, he makes a few mistakes. Drew was like that too. He was very innovative. Nobody liked him. And he never lacked confidence in what he was going to do. It was almost like he knew that he had only a certain amount of time on Earth to create a legacy that will never be topped. And that's what he's done.
Yeah, see, that's where I'm kind of coming back around a circle. See, that's what you have always been for me. It's an incredibly giving mentor. Ernie, people that have your talent, they don't do that. They don't give that away for free. They want to monetize it. And so from an early age, people can always look to you and go, you know what, he was not just an artist, he's not just an incredible business guy, but Ernie the human is a pretty special pretty special person. When people come to my office and I'm giving them the nickel tour of what you've meant, I always start off with, he's one of my best friends. And I'll go on for 15 minutes and then I'll say, oh, by the way, he was this artist, right? Oh, by the way, when you talk about Elon, right? What do you see are the trends coming? Like, business used to be different back in the day. It seems like there was a mentor class. That seems like if our generation doesn't teach that, it's gone forever, because I don't see that. What do you see?
I see the same thing you're talking about. I see decades of generations that don't want to work hard. They think that everything should be given to them. They're entitled. They don't have to work for it. And, they want to retire at 30. And that's just not going to happen. I mean, the reality is, I feel sorry for those kind of people that feel that way. That you just look at that and go, "What's wrong with this person? Are their brain rotten or something? Don't they realize that there's a real world out there?" And I think a lot of it has to do with the parents and the way they were raised, giving them everything, and now they feel that everybody gets a trophy. We all participate, and it's not that way. Reality isn't that way, and I think that in the end, reality always wins. It's like gravity. Gravity always wins. As hard as we fight to stay standing, it eventually wins. And that's why I want to be buried standing up. I can take up less space and just drill a hole, drop me in it, put some dirt on top, and I'm fine. I'm good. But yeah, I see the same thing you are. And then there's the ethics and morals and self-worth. That it's all kind of, I don't know, it's becoming, and I think the computer is a big problem of creating that. Social media and the computer makes everything so immediate.
Yeah, one of the things that always impressed me was one of the last times we talked, you told me that you turned down a collaboration with one of the current world's best known artists. You turned down a collaboration with Banksy. Why?
Yeah. Why? Just because it wasn't right. It just wasn't. It wasn't. I again, I'm at a point now where I can spend 5 minutes with somebody and I know whether they're just, they want me really or they want what I know, and then I'm expendable. So I just didn't see it working like that.
Yeah, and so I was amazed because, you said that the current business climate is, how do you have any worth when all you're doing is acting as an AI prompt engineer, right?
Yeah.
Right. So for you to turn down, I'm sure all of the fame and additional fortune and that you would have gotten through that collaboration, because you first have a massive amount of self-respect, and I think that's just missing.
I mean, it's like I've never realized that I could say no. Your ability to say no is the best thing you have going for you. And especially as a creative person, I mean, I just knew that it wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't what I foresaw. And it just wasn't morally and ethically correct. I mean, what they wanted was not what I wanted to do. And I never, younger, in my career, I would take anything I could get. Take chicken poop and make chicken salad. That was whatever you could do and keep it as long as you could. And now I'm at a point in my career where it's too much brain damage. It's too much. It's not what I want to do, and I have the ability to say no. In any negotiation, you're only as strong as your ability to say no. And would I like the money? Yeah. Would I like the fame? Well, I think that what I've done in my career so far has made me as famous as I want to be. I don't need to be any more famous.
Yeah, no doubt.
I've already hit that mark. I want to go out making it better than I found it. I got that from the Beatles. Music was a certain way before the Beatles came along. You had a hit, the next single you put out sounded kind of like the hit, and you kept just doing that. When the Beatles came along, 3 guitars and a drum, and they changed the world. And then they gave us a new way of listening to music, a new way to appreciate music because it was different than the one before. It taught us change. It taught us to be open-minded and make things timeless. You can play a Beatles song today and it sounds like it was just recorded. Okay. My artwork, I've always tried to strive toward timelessness. Because when you talk about the Beatles and the Stones and the groups that you mentioned, the English Invasion, what were they singing? They were singing all the songs from the Delta and stuff. That was, blues and stuff. That was made. That's what got them to know, right? The Beatles, the Stones, all of them.
They sped up the
Zombies,
beats.
all of them were singing, black music.
Yep.
From the Delta. From
Yeah.
But again, it was time to take something, and that's to that. Do the same thing they did. They took something old and made it new again. Okay, I take things that are old that I've done and make them new again.
Yeah.
And that's only because of the timelessness that went into it. It's the way to evolve things. If you look at what you're talking about, what I'm talking about, look at life itself. It constantly re-involves itself. It reboots itself to become more relevant to the people that are here now. I mean, again, it's great. And, generations from now, I talked to a woman in your office that was in Africa teaching art, and she was teaching the stuff that we had done. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
I mean, that's something I'll never forget. I mean, she's teaching stuff about me. People are learning about me and Pacific Pioneer, younger people that, never heard of us. And I think it's just awesome. I mean, it just reassures me that, yeah, I've made a few milestones, but there's something even greater.
Brother, that is such a unique thing to be able to
Well, I think,
access somebody.
growing up in the 60s, I think growing up in the 60s had a lot to do with that. I mean, it was really more about family and sharing, and whether it's a commune. A lot of the kids that I went to school with, it was a small college. There was 125 kids full time. Most of them lived in Haight-Ashbury in communes and stuff, and would commute over from San Francisco to Oakland to go to school. So on weekends, we go over to their commune and live with the hippies and stuff, and be down in Haight-Ashbury, and all the stuff that was going on there, and partying. One of the things that I'll never forget, we used to party out in front of Grunt Records, which was Jefferson Airplane's built. They had a Victorian house. It was all the gingerbread was painted different colors. It was really crazy. It was right there in the heart. It was a former bank, and they bought it and made it Grunt Records, and it was right there in the heart of Haight-Ashbury. So we would party in front of their house all the time. And then in less than 3 years later, 4 years later, I'm inside partying with them, which was like insane. And that was one of the other things, working in the music thing. I always liked music, especially in college, and all that hippie thing, and Donovan, and that whole thing that was changing from beatniks to hippies. And I was there for that transition. And, going from the coffee houses to Fillmore West and Avalon Ballroom, and how that was all changing at the same time, and being part of all of that, and that generation of sharing and loving, I never forgot. I mean, it was indoctrinated into me in college for, the whole time that I was there. I mean, we were there during the Vietnam War, and stopping that, and People's Park, and Huey Newton, and Angela Davis, and all the stuff that was going on. There was a diesel truck that would tour all around the Bay Area. It was called the Jelly Roll Press, and there were all these hippies that had a printing facility in a diesel truck, the big trailer. And it was like rave parties. If you knew where the truck was going to be, you could take artwork over there and give it to them, and they would make posters and stuff and put them all over, Haight-Ashbury and Oakland and Berkeley and all that stuff. So we were part of that whole movement that was going on. We would do artwork different than the artwork we would turn in for projects, and know where the Jelly Roll Press was going to be, and give them the artwork, and they would produce it, and you'd see it all over the place in Haight-Ashbury and stuff. It was very cool. But they moved around so the cops couldn't catch them, because it was all anti-war stuff. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of deviants that came out of there, but I consider that whole time the last Renaissance, that art and business and the world came together in that time, from the 60s. Like, I was there from 64 to 69. And those were the critical years of Vietnam and Nixon and all the Ronald Reagan and all the stuff that was going on in the world. The music was coming from, the whole, by the 70s, the music had moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. And again, I was in the right spot at the right time, being in Los Angeles, where all the music was being recorded. Groups were going to, be discovered and signed to record labels. That was the heart of all of it. And I was, again, as I look back over my career, I've always been in the right spot at the right time. And timing is everything. Without timing, you got nothing.
But you have to capitalize on it. Like, I remember you telling me that even when you were doing the Lips and Tongue logo, right, that you taught me that you were one of the few artists that knew to do it art for hire. that you have the rights to everything you've ever created.
Yeah.
How many
All work
artists
for hire. Yeah.
Yeah, how many artists have ever done that? See, that's
None.
already that's what I'm
None.
coming back to. That's another reason why you're so different. And your mentorship has taught people how to respect what they create and that it has value, right? To know
Yeah.
your worth
Yeah.
and to stand up for it.
A lot of that, Larry, was because of my partner, Tony. I mean, I was giving pieces away to the groups. They wanted a piece, so I give it to them. You know, we're all friends. It's all family. Give it to them. And it pulled me to one side because Drew had gone to him. Drew went to Tony and said, look, you got to stop him giving that stuff away because that's your retirement. That is your retirement.
Yep,
He knew
yep.
even then. This is like 1962, 63. And so Tony sat me down and said, you're going to stop giving that stuff away. We're putting in every contract we write with a group, with a manager, with a record company, it will be spelled out the agreement that this artwork is exclusive property of Pacific Pioneer. And it was all work for hire. He knew all that. Everybody that worked there knew that their work was work for hire. That's how I ended up with thousands of pieces. I got 350 originals. 72 of them are Drew Struzan's. You have some. I mean, it's thank God for him, because I would have just given them away and the cardboard box would have gotten bigger and bigger in my, in my scope of where I was going to end up. It was him and Drew and but Tony was very much a businessman. I was not the business end of it. That's why when we became partners, I knew I couldn't do it all myself. And even though Bonnie worked for the company, it got overwhelming. And you're dealing with the record business. These guys are sharks. Okay, they're used to taking creative people and chewing them up and spitting them out.
Some of my prized pieces, you told me, were salvaged from the trash can because the photographer was going to throw them away. And I can't believe it because they're incredible, right? But they obviously, the photographers and everybody else didn't have any respect for what you were doing. It was just like, oh, this is sort of incidental, throw it away.
That's why we're creatives are at the mercy of the wrong kind of person, whether it's in the record business or in the corporate world. We're prey. We're bait. We're the number one bait on the hook that they have out there. And I've come to learn that the way I tell right away is, as soon as they say to me, man, we're going to have so much fun, we're going to give you all this work, we're going to have so much fun doing it, all they're really saying is they're going to have a lot of fun taking advantage of me. And that's not going to happen. Not anymore. It happened early on, but I learned pretty quick. I may be Italian and not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I learned pretty quick, and I can show you the scars on my back from people like that. And, it's you're right. I mean, it's my whole life. I'm no saint. I've done stuff that I don't even want to talk about, but, in the end of the day, I've never hurt anybody. I've only tried to make people satisfied. The biggest joy that I get is having a client say to me, man, you've exceeded my expectations. And that's a phrase that's way overused. But I think that I under promise and over deliver rather than over promising and under delivering. And that's a big difference, plus planning the work and working the plan. It's those simple things that are in the foundation of myself. And whether it's Pacific Pioneer or David Hale or any of these other companies, Pacific, Hornbook, any of these companies that I have and had, it's always been that same pillars, those same ethical and moral pillars that need to be in place before I start laying, the rest of the house. The work that I've been able to create. I created art history. That's really, and I've come to that realization a while back that I've really created art history. Me and my team, not just me. It's me and my team. We've created art history. The same way Andy Warhol with his soup can changed the fine art world. The same way that Drew Struzan with his movie poster stuff that he did changed the movie industry. We changed the record industry. But more than that, I've created art history. That's my life is art. It's always been art since I was a little kid and waiting for the Sunday paper to come with all the comic strips and sit there and draw Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse. And, Even after high school, I never planned to go to college. I was just going to keep dragging the main in my 57 Chevy, but then summer was over and I needed to do something and I didn't know what I wanted to do. But again, I think, without sounding too hokey, I think God had a bigger plan for me. And it really became apparent a few months ago, about that, with that blood clot over my heart. And it was a life or death situation. One morning I had this pain under my rib cage on the left side. And so I put a heating pad on it, and a couple of days later it went away. And then a day or so later it came back, and it was on the left side of my rib cage. And I put a heating pad on it, but it wasn't going away. And then it moved up over my heart. And again, Bonnie, who I was trying to convince that I had a magical heating pad that could solve all medical issues. I had the only one, and she said, no, you're going to the hospital. So we went to the urgent care, and they did a scan, and the doctor came back in and he said, you need to go to the emergency. And I figured, well, what, I must have cracked a rib or something. I don't know. And to make a long story short, I'm in this room, and the nurse comes in with one of those garments that you wear that's open up in the back. So I knew I'm not going home, and it's going to be something a little more serious. And at that very moment, Bonnie gets a text from my sister-in-law. My brother had passed away. So here I am in the emergency room, not knowing what's going on. My brother's dead. And now I think I'm going to be dying at the same time. So we're both going to die on the same day. So these doctors come back in, and the one guy goes, look, you're in a life or death situation. And I want to look around and see if he was talking to somebody else. Couldn't have been me. I just have a little pain here. And it's like Homer Simpson when they're trying to, everything goes from talk to blah, 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 blah. I didn't understand a word they were saying, right? I'm just freaking out, life or death situation. So when the main doctor said, what do you want to do? I said, well, look, if you guys needed a logo or an ad campaign, I'd be the guy you'd want to come to. I hadn't been to a doctor in 25 years. Okay, so I'm scared out of my wits. So that was a Thursday that we went to the urgent care, Thursday morning at 10. We're in the hospital by like 2 o'clock. By 4 o'clock, they wheel me into this room, and it's like being abducted by aliens. And so these people come over and they're introducing themselves, and the main doctor comes over and he introduces himself and he says, would you like to watch? And I'm like, sure, okay. I'm a bit of a warrior. I'll watch. I'll watch just about anything with this eye. This eye I'll keep closed. And what they ended up doing was they went up through my groin on the right side, up into my lung, and I'm watching it. And they sucked this blood clot out. And then he said, do you want to see it? Well, I've gone this far. I might as well. Sure, let me see it. So they bring this platter out with this tubular, about a ½ inch in circumference. It was about 6 inches long with roots on either side. And it was like an upside down U. It was going from my left lung to my right lung. And if it would have done that, I would have died. And I had just a day or so before, I was going to rent a car to go see my brother one last time. He said, if you'd have done that, you'd die. They moved me. They said that was on a Saturday. And they said, everything looks good. We're going to move you over and to release you on Sunday. So I'm like all happy. That night, you can't sleep. You just can't sleep. Whoever designed those medical beds designed the seats in airports. They're just totally uncomfortable. And so I'm not sleeping, and they had this big clock on the wall, and I know every 15 minutes, because the blood pressure swells up and you can feel it on your arm. There was this nurse that came up, and we were talking. Her name was Maria. She was Spanish. And we were talking. She had known what they had done to me. I told her about my brother. I told her about what I did and all this stuff. And she was very sweet. We talked for about 15 minutes. That night, Saturday night, I'm there and I'm trying to sleep. And I look over, and I was about 25 feet from the door. And the room was dark that I was in. The hallway where the door was lit, because that's where all the doctors and nurses go back and forth. So I'm looking at the doorway, and there's this silhouette of a woman. She was just lit around her, okay, like an aura. And I didn't think of anything right away, but she came over to me, And I know I was awake. And she took my hand, I swear to God, and she started praying for me. She prayed for my brother. She prayed for me. She just knew all these things. And I figured it was that nurse, but she didn't have the same accent. But I figured it was her because how would she know all that stuff? And I remember at a certain point, she prayed for 5 or 6 minutes. And I looked over at the clock again because I was tracking how much time went by. And I looked back and she was gone. And the next day, Sunday, when I'm going to be released, I was waiting for her to come back in so I could ask her if that was her and thank her for doing that. She never came back. So I'll tell you honestly, God touched my soul that night. I was touched by an angel. And all I can say is God has better things for me to do right now. And that is, in my mind, just keep on doing what I've been doing, and there's something big that's going to happen, things that are happening right now that are pretty amazing. A couple different things that we talked about with China and another thing here in the US. But God came into my life again that night. He never left. I just forgot about him from time to time. I never realized how important a role he played in my life and in my past. I mean, everything I have, everything that has come to me in good and bad is because of his plan for me. And I know now that, I'm very excited. I'm very excited about the future. I'm a different person now than I was before this happened. And what happened was God gave me a second chance. There's not many times that you get a second chance in life, and it's so funny because social media, I have these people that I've never met that were praying for me and helping me, because it spreads really fast in social media. And, my Ernie's Corner that I do every week, we get thousands of people. That's just on Facebook. It's also in college campuses in 3 different states.
Yeah.
It's public radio.
Well,
so we just track, but she was very supportive.
Yeah, that's the way the real community is. That we pray for people we don't know, right? But, yeah. So, Ernie, you said God's got something prepared for you. What do you think that is?
I don't know, Larry. I don't know, but I know this. I know it has to do with the value I can bring, whether it's an account, whether it's the show that you were the first, you were the one that really made this collection that I have important. It was always stuff that was tucked away. Okay. And today it's an avalanche with 2 museum shows, with all the stuff we're doing in China. And the guy in China that owns 2 skyscrapers that we're doing this thing with is a huge rock and roll star. He's very, not star, he's a fan, but he's highly connected in the Chinese government. What we're doing is, along with all these other huge corporations from the United States, fashion industry in US, Paris, England, all over, going to this spot and doing this thing that we're going to be doing. The guy is possibly interested in buying the whole collection and making it the first album cover art museum in the world.
Yeah.
Which is, I've talked to you about that. So, maybe it's one of those things. I don't know.
I would hate to see it be in China. It needs to be in Memphis. But the time I have spent with you have been more personally rewarding than almost anybody I have ever bumped up against. And I know this is starting to sound like a mutual, pat each other on the back session. It's not. It's just that I want to be on record to give you thanks, to express the impact and the legacy that you've left and the legacy that I've learned from you to pass on to my clients. When my brother died, I didn't have anybody to replace him. And then you came along, and you're kind of like my big brother that I loved more than anything. And you've always been that big brother, mentor, caretaker, caregiver guy for me. So there you have it.
I appreciate that.
I can't thank you enough. So
you've done so much for me, Larry.
Yeah.
And what you've taught me and reinforced in me is that actions speak louder than words. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, you couldn't find the words. You didn't need the words. Your actions spoke volumes.
Yeah.
And I totally believe that. I mean, anybody can talk a good game. Go out and do it. I'm so happy. I mean, I've said it before, and I this instance that happened in the hospital. If I were to pass away tomorrow, I would have left a mark. And for me, that's, it's like Kilroy was here.
Yeah. So Ernie, I know we're coming to the end of our time, right? At least for today. At least for today.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'd love to do it again. There's so much to talk about.
All right, we'll do it.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Love you.
Okay.